Hello friends, good to be with you again today. Last week, if you remember, if you saw the one from last week, and it's still online of course, I spoke about the request, demand by many Indigenous and non-Indigenous that the Pope come to Canada and on this soil ask for forgiveness. And so I reflected on that, and if you remember, in a sense what I was saying is, my belief is that the Pope is saying, I'll come, no problem, and I will ask forgiveness, no problem. But you, Church in Canada, bishops, priests, lay people, religious, you do your work first. You do the hard work first, the true work that's needed, and then I'll come, okay? And then I said that then this week would be about then what is our part. Well, actually I'm going to put that off till next week. Why? Because on the 25th of July, Sunday the 25th of July, at the request of Pope Francis, it's the day for grandparents and, great-grandparents, okay? And it's within the context of the Year for the Family that the Pope instituted, called forth, as a second reflection on the family 5 years after the first one, which was Amoris Laetitia, which was his letter coming out of the Synod of the Bishops worldwide on the family. So the Synod, he listened, he wrote a reflection, Amoris Laetitia. 5 years later now, he's saying the family is such a building block of society, but even more, so absolutely key to the human person, to human relationships, to the society of humanity, that we need to come back to it again and again in reflection, in prayer. And so within the context of that, he has named Sunday, July 25th, as within the Church, the World Day for honoring, thanking, praying for grandparents and great-grandparents, and reflecting upon the role of grandparents within the family, all of our families. And but before I go into that reflection, I'd like to share with you a little bit about my own grandparents, okay? I never knew my maternal grandparents. My parents got married a little bit later. They were both 33 years old, and my mom by then had lost both of her parents, therefore my grandparents, whom I never knew, to cancer, both of them in their 50s, really young. And so I never knew them, but I would often ask questions about them, because I really believe when you go back, you sort of come to a knowledge of why you are the way you are, and you are the way you are as a family, the relationships between siblings, and all of that, okay? So I would ask about them, and my mom would share that, about what kind of people they were. And then, but on my paternal side, on my father's side, those grandparents, I did know. And when I was growing up, they were there. They lived, a mile away on a farm that my grandfather had bought after his first homestead, which he kept, and where my dad was born in a log cabin. but which was really poor soil and full of rocks. At one point he was able to buy better land, and so that was the farmstead where my dad grew up. There were 4 boys, 4 girls in that family, and that's where Grandma and Grandpa still lived. They had their old house, even as my uncle was the one doing the farming. And so we would go and visit them. They were, well, my grandma was really welcome, and she loved to play cards, and kids, you're sitting at your table with grandma and you're playing cards, and you see she cheats a little bit, but oh, what, forget it. And just fun together, okay? Actually, my grandfather and my grandmother married when he was 37, she was 19. And she was a vivacious lady and just welcoming people and joyful and chatty and just a wonderful lady. She stayed with us for several years before going into a nursing home, okay? And one of my memories will always be this old lady, because at that time they had worked, in that time they were old in their 70s and 80s because they had worked so hard, and like life had been tough, but they had worked so that the next generation would have more, better. And I can still see this old lady sitting in her chair in front, with the TV, and she was watching WWF, Worldwide Wrestling. And she was, give it to him. My mother was not impressed, but we, the kids, we found it so funny. Anyway, she was my grandfather on the other side, so my dad's dad. He had come when he was all by himself from France, from Brittany, with probably not more than a couple dollars in his pocket. Arrived, went to Saint-Boniface, worked with some people that he knew from back home, got a little bit of what we call grub stake, and then moved on to Saskatchewan, to Saint-Boniface, and got some land there, and married, and family. But he wasn't taciturn, he was just very quiet. To this day, I hardly know much about my grandfather at all in terms of the years before he came to Canada. It was never talked about, not like in my grandmother's family. And I think I get some from him. I'm actually an introvert now, for sure. Bishop, in a role of speaking, just watch out, let me go, okay? But actually my default position is very introverted and quiet. It comes from my grandfather. My father was more like his mother, my grandmother, and it's taken many years and much patience and love for my sisters to bring me to be real and to open my heart. Okay? Families. But the immense place in our lives of grandparents, because grandparents is that experience where, as a child, they love you unconditionally, they welcome you, they give you cookies, they hug you, they share their experience of life, deep wisdom, great joys and great hurts, and there's not an element of discipline there. It's a joke. Boy, if I knew grandchildren were so much fun, I would have had them first. So just unconditional love and acceptance and fostering and encouraging and helping to grow, and then they hand them over to their parents. We did our job, you're the result of our job, now you've got a job, you do it, we're just going to love these kids. And these kids love the loving, if I can put it that way. And then, so the incredible value, richness, human richness of grandparents. Now, of course, at one point, and especially because we live longer these days, many of the grandparents, great-grandparents, lose their mind. Dementia, Alzheimer's, all of that. And then I think it's really the time for the fourth commandment, honor your father and mother. Because honoring your father and mother, it didn't really have to do anything with little children listening to their mom and dad. It had to do with adult children not abandoning, not ignoring, being indifferent to the old parent who can no longer contribute. Well, maybe they contribute immensely, but in another way. And so not to abandon them, not to, forget them, not to, visit them once a year in a nursing home and think you're a good son or good daughter. No. Honor your father and mother when they are old and not able. And so you see then the richness of human love within the family around grandparents. And I finish off with this short reflection. So imagine when that whole richness, of love is cut off, broken, destroyed because of something like the residential schools. Kids going to residential schools, being hauled off to residential schools, coming back 6-7 years later, only able to speak English because that's what it was, and no longer able to communicate with their kokum and their musha, who only knew Cree or Anishinaabe. Just think of that tragedy. We'll come back to that next week. Thank you.